Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The white media is talking about Nikki Haley being worried about her chances to beat Trump in the primaries of South Carolina, her own home state. But you know there's also another presidential candidate who's a little bit nervous about their chances in that state. Jim Crow Joe Biden. He's been trying to put a pretty face on it, but it's not working, and South Carolina has turned out to be more than just a brief stopover for him. It's a state where his failure to gain black support has become undeniable, and that's got Biden worried along with the DNC, because they were telling everybody that they had this all wrapped up. Don't worry, all the voters, especially those pesky Negroes, they're gonna come home come election time, but it hasn't been happening. Black folks have stayed out the plantation and ain't coming back. Now, as Politico is reporting, and the black media has been telling you for years, Biden's trying to get black votes. But he's trying to do it in a way where he doesn't actually give us anything. So the Democrats are going with the same old failed strategy. Carpet bomb us with radio ads, more BS TV spots, and of course keep trotting out the same old bought and paid for Negro bootlicks to sell the soap for them. You got the Democrats talking about they're going to be running ads. They're not running ads, they're running game is what they're doing. They're running game on black people, and we got to make sure we stop falling for the okie doke. When they talk about running ads, what they mean is the typical Democratic propaganda Jedi mind trick. Oh, Biden's done so much for you Negroes, you just don't know. I know, it only looks like he hasn't done anything just because you got empty pockets and you're watching as he gives everything to everybody else and he totally ignores you. That's just your imagination. He's done so much. Why, he's made it where illegal aliens can vote, and abortion, that matters a lot to you, right? You don't need to pay your bills, you need abortions. You only think you've been ignored. In reality, Biden's done so much for you. That's what they mean by running ads. Going to be telling us all these lies and fairy tales and untruths about Biden having done all this stuff that he didn't do. And how's that been working? Well, as Politico reports, Biden's advisors are betting these investments will underscore to black voters across the country that the campaign is prioritizing them. At a minimum, they believe it will prevent those criticisms from Democrats worried about Biden's standing with the base from becoming a deafening chorus. Recent polls have shown Biden underperforming among black voters by double digits compared to his 2020 results. You get that? Biden is underperforming now by double digits compared to where he was just 4 years ago. He is in worse political shape now than he was 4 years ago when he ran against and beat Trump, who, in case you forgot, led an insurrection and was impeached twice. And now Trump is ahead of Biden in all of the battleground states. Now you see why that whole 14th Amendment challenge to Trump's candidacy is so important for the Democrats. The Democrats have seen this movie before, and they don't like how it ends. This is a replay of the 2016 presidential election that we're seeing unfolding. Deja vu all over again. How do you lose in the polls to an orange-skinned carnival barker who tries to overthrow the government, and he's been scandalized on everything from his marriage to his taxes to his friends? It's because Biden made a lot of promises to the black community, many of them empty gestures, and he didn't keep any of those phony promises. That's how you wind up like this. That's how you wind up behind in the polls to a man who you ought to be beating by at least a good 30 or 40 percentage points easily. It's because of all of the lies. Biden produced a hate crime law for Asians and a federal gay marriage law for the LGBT community, but for black voters who he said he had the backs of, the people who put him in office, nothing. We've heard all of his lies before. Biden and Kamala 4 years ago talked about a lift every voice plan. Anyone remember whatever happened to that idea? His White House level police accountability commission? Anyone remember what happened to that? Oh yeah, Biden said he didn't have time for it, so he wasn't going to do it. And as for reparations, Biden's running mate said she wasn't going to do something that only benefits black people. No! I guess that's why Biden was so eager to have her as his vice president. And speaking of reparations, what has Biden said about it? Nothing. So what the hell is this for black people to vote for? And what's this crap about showing that the campaign is prioritizing us? That's a joke. They say nothing about reparations or about legislation and resources to punish these race killers who are targeting us. We're not being prioritized at all. We're being ignored. Well, as Politico also wrote, one of Biden's deputy campaign managers said that Biden was running paid advertising aimed at black and Latino voters in swing states. Now, he started that back in August. Here we are 5 months later. What's the return on investment been? He's behind more in the polls than he was before. And the white media is doing their usual narrative. They have an article that starts off talking about black people, has black people in the headline, And right on time, they then switch from black to black and brown or black and whatever. Because when talking about black people, you can't just mention black people in isolation. You got to mention everybody else too. So that's the problem. And what's Biden's solution to all of this black support he's been hemorrhaging? Put out more campaign ads. But even the white media admits they know exactly what the real problem is. Quote, but there are other Democrats who fear that success in South Carolina could prove to be fool's gold for the campaign. The state has an older primary electorate, strategists said. The black voters that Biden is struggling with most in the general election are younger. So there you have it. They say exactly what it is. Older voters turn out for the primary elections, but the problem is Biden doesn't have enough old people to get him to victory. He needs to also mobilize younger black voters, which apparently means any black voter under the age of 55. And those black voters are the main ones telling him, we're not going for the con game. The article goes on to write, in private, campaign aides have stressed that they feel good currently about their ability to win over independent voters and even Donald Trump's skeptical Republicans should the former president emerge from the Republican primary. It's the party's base, black voters among them, they're worried about. Not so much that they'd vote for Trump, but that they'd stay home. Now let's get one thing straight. When they're talking about the party base, they ain't talking about the Asian vote. They ain't talking about the Hispanic vote. They're not talking about the Jewish vote. They're talking about black voters. Ain't enough LGBT voters to be able to win the election for mayor, much less president. They're talking about black voters. Black voters are the ones who handed Biden Georgia. Black voters are the ones who handed Biden Pennsylvania. Black voters are the ones who handed Biden Michigan. Without black voters, he would not have had those swing states, and now Trump is ahead in all of them. See, the list of constituencies that Biden's aides say that they've had success with, though, independent voters and Donald Trump's skeptical Republicans, this is the strategy that I've been telling you about for years now, that the Democrats have been pursuing. Ever since black voters started making solid demands, ever since we became problematic as a voting bloc, the Democrats have been trying to replace us with other non-black constituencies. They've been reaching out heavy to these other constituencies, seeing if they can woo them, hand them things. We got you a gay marriage law. We got you a hate crime law. You're going to vote for us now, right? No. They've been running heavy to get the support of casual racist, read white moderates. That's those Trump skeptical Republicans we hear about. That's what Rahm Emanuel and others were talking about when they were saying Biden Republicans. That's what they mean. Their goal was to cobble together a Frankenstein monster of a voter base, one that would have no parts that came from black people. That way they would have themselves a new voter base that was no longer vulnerable to all of these demands we were making. And here, though, they're admitting that's what they've been doing, trying to get people who are not aligned with either political party, or better yet, get Republicans to switch to Biden. That's why you see Democrats hammering abortion and the January 6th insurrection and immigration and other stuff so much, because those issues appeal to some group or another, either with center of right voters or with non-black constituencies. That's the reason why they're doing it. They're pushing buttons, and they're trying to see if any of the buttons work. So far, they haven't. A number of registered Republicans support abortion, and they didn't like the insurrection, so the Democrats and CNN and MSNBC hammered that point daily, but it simply hasn't been enough. The problem is black voters. That's their problem, particularly young black voters, or at least the ones who ain't old. And the fear is not that these black voters are going to vote for Trump, but rather that black voters will just stay home instead. That's what Politico wrote. Now, what does that tell you? That's important because for the longest time, the white media has been pushing the lie that black voters are switching to Trump. Haven't you heard that? I've been pointing that out to you. They've been saying, black voters are switching to Trump, No, we're not. We in the black media have told you that's a lie. We have not been switching to Trump. The white media only told that lie because they're desperate to get you off of one treadmill and onto another. Stop being on the Democrats' treadmill and get on the Republicans' treadmill. So they claim that black voters, they're not disengaging from the electoral system. Oh, this is more complex than that. Why? They're switching parties. And they're telling that lie, and they've been telling it hoping that you would fall for it. But you haven't, because the black media has been making sure to keep you on point. And here they are admitting the truth. Younger black voters are fed up with the Democrats' lies and fed up with Biden in specific. And this anger will take the form of black voters sitting out the 2024 election. And no amount of scare talk about a fascist takeover is going to frighten black voters to the polls this time. See, the only reason Biden is president now is because Trump's racism was so obnoxious that a lot of black voters who stayed home in 2016 decided to vote in 2020. But as I told you 4 years ago, that's a trick that the Democrats only get to pull once. Also, it needs to be mentioned, Trump was politically weakened by the political and economic chaos caused by the pandemic. It caused all kinds of confusion and chaos within the white right. And this time, though, there is no pandemic to help undermine Trump against Biden. So when Politico writes that there are Democrats who are worried that the murmuring is going to become a deafening chorus, well, you're a little bit late on that one. It's so loud now that it's dominating the narrative. Black voter turnout has been in decline for a decade now, ever since 2013. We're going on 11 years of this now. And Biden's seeing that the scare tactics aren't working. Doesn't matter how many bootlicks or how many of these old gray heads they bring out here. All of those old black voters who were going along with the get along, they're dying out. And the younger black voters are not taking their place. That's the problem that the Democrats have. Whether deliberately or not, it looks like Biden is determined for his campaign to die on this hill, sticking to the Democrats' policy of not producing anything for us. That's his primary motivation. Winning the election is not. To the Democrats, it's a game of political brinksmanship. You see, 4 years ago, black voters blinked. Instead of sticking to our guns, what happened was we had a bunch of people scared out there saying Donald Trump is too dangerous, etc., etc. And we in the black media told you, you vote for Biden. It's not as if he's going to be concerned about that. He's not going to suddenly decide, well, you know what? We don't want to displease these black voters, so we better do right by him this time. No, you vote for him, and he's going to double down on it. Because as far as he's concerned, if you blinked once, you'll blink twice. If you gave in once, you'll give in again. Everybody from the police to the average thug on the street understands that principle. This is how politics works in the real world. We told you that Biden wasn't going to do anything for us, that the uprisings of 2020 meant nothing to Biden and the Democrats, because as they saw it, the white media had successfully convinced people this was all about Trump. And if you get Trump out of there, why, things will get better. So of course he wasn't going to do anything but slap us in the face soon as he won, which is exactly what he did, repeatedly. Too many black people were scared of Trump as if Biden was any different or any better. See, that's the true evil genius of the white media. They've brainwashed a lot of black folks into being so detached from our own interest, so separated from our own suffering, that they can beat us to death with a whip till the flesh comes off our backs and we'll smile and say thank you as long as it's a Democrat holding the whip. We never seem to register in our minds that the Democrats are doing all the very things that they claim only the Republicans do. Neither one of the major parties is for us, but we bought into the white media's controlled opposition narrative to the point that we numbed ourselves to this abuse. But the black media came along and started waking people back up again. So this time we have to show that we won't blink. You can't win a game of nerves if you're scared. After years and years, over a decade of trying to pretend as if they didn't know we were out here and what we were saying was true, now they're having to finally admit it. Former Michigan Democratic State Representative Sherry Gay DeGongo said she recently surveyed fellow black community members about Biden, quote, and if this small inquiry is a sign of a much larger trend, then he's in trouble, she said. They feel he did what was necessary to secure the black vote, but hasn't delivered on black issues. So you got the Democrats' own politicians now saying what we've been saying all along. Biden gave some lip service, you had some scared or otherwise well-meaning, but let's be honest, gullible Negroes who went along with it. They talked themselves into a lie that they on some level had to know wasn't true. Biden did just enough, and then as soon as he got the nomination and then he got the presidency, he said, all right, to hell with you Negroes. He hasn't delivered on anything. Oh, and I'd like to take some of the suspense out of it for Miss Gay Dagnogo. This is not merely a sign of a much larger trend. This is the trend. And you're right, Biden is in trouble. Just like Hillary Clinton was 8 years ago. She also was behind in those battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and others. But just like Joe Biden, you had the white media singing the siren song of surely these Negroes are not going to disobey MASSA. Surely they're not going to be sitting home acting in their own best interest. They're going to put the interest of Hillary Clinton ahead of their own. Surely they will. That was the siren song they sang 8 years ago. And that siren song ended as a tragedy. Now they're doing it again with Joe Biden, and if the trend continues, which I believe it will, they're going to achieve the exact same results, and they should. As black voters, we have to leverage some sort of consequences for ignoring us. We have to show that we have the will to punish people when they refuse to produce for us. If somebody calls themselves saying, I want your vote and I'll do ABC, and then we give them our vote, and they say, okay, then I'm leaving. No, you guys, you're fine on your own. That is somebody who has to be punished. But you want to know what I noticed missing from this little story on Politico? Any mention of nigga Jim Clyburn, America's favorite sharecropper. Oh, they got him in the picture for the headline image, sitting here making nice with Biden. But there's no mention of him in the story at all. Nor of any of these other baby boomers, no mention of the civil rights retreads. See, they're trying to avoid saying that there's a generation gap here. That's what they're trying to avoid saying. They say, well, there's a problem with younger voters. That means you got a generation gap. And you know exactly why that is. The younger voters are looking and saying, these guys ain't offering us nothing. The older voters, all they're concerned about is Social Security. Long as Social Security's around, you can continue to have their vote. And they ain't got nothing better to do except for crawl out of the house 2 times a year, maybe 3 if they're lucky, if there's a special election, and they'll go vote because they ain't got nothing else better to do. That's what happens. That's the problem. You see, they know that they can't be dragging out any of these Clyburns to talk to us. Some hog-mog preacher, some pulpit pimp, that ain't going to work. They can't send them out. You know what, though? I got an idea. If the Democrats are having a problem reaching those younger black voters, you know, the under 55 crowd, why don't they hire Roly-Poly Martin to be a consultant for them? I mean, he has the pulse of the people, right? And he's been begging like a dog for a political consulting gig ever since CNN dumped him. So that's a long time for him to be begging, but that's what he's been doing. The Democrats, they need to hire some folks who know what's going on with the black community. That need to hire messaging. Your problem is messaging. Remember that? The political misleaders have failed to con the younger black voters, so I guess it's time to let the white media's cast-offs try their hand at the wheel, because they've been right about everything else so far, haven't they? Roly-Poly, you remember, was the one who was cursing and ranting on that broom closet show of his when he said that younger black voters aren't important and aren't going to do anything, and the Democrats need to forget about the younger black voters and just focus on the older ones and focus on getting the old folks to the polls. That was Roly-Poly's free advice to the DNC. Y'all need to stop worrying about them younger voters. They stuck on the internet listening to them angry folk, them new voice of black media, them fools. You need to focus on them older voters. That's how you win with them older voters. That was Roly-Poly's advice. And that's exactly what the Democrats have done. And look where it's put them. So we can see how much value Roly-Poly's sage consulting advice has. Even the GOP, which is the party of old white men, even they don't talk like Roly-Poly does. They don't talk stupid like that. Even the GOP, as terminally geriatric as they are, they understand that if they can't bring in new blood, if they fail to bring in young people, younger voters, then their party will literally die out. Roly-Poly hasn't gotten the memo on how mortality rates work. And speaking of clueless tools, the article also has a quote from a woman named Adrienne Shropshire, and if that name sounds familiar to you, it should. She's the head of the so-called Black Pack. I did a video about her. You can find it in the archives of this very YouTube channel. I explained and showed that Black Pack is actually a white-funded, white-controlled organization, so-called dark money. They ought to call it pale money, because that's what it is. White money came up with it and funded it. White money funds it today, and they went and hired a front black person to claim that she's the one who runs it. That's what Black Pack is. Naturally, Shropshire just cheerleads for the Democrats no matter what, because that's her job. But it's not ours. Family, we have to prove that it's a brand new day now, that we are willing to destabilize the system if it fails to produce for us. The white media has told a ton of lies, but because we've stuck to our guns, they now have to admit the truth, however grudgingly. And it's exactly what we told you it's been for the last several years. The white media has to lie about us because to tell the truth would be too terrifying. Well, it's our job to make sure their worst nightmare comes true. We will ignore and eventually overtake the white media's propaganda. We will crush these bootlicks and ultimately break the backs of these white supremacists on the white right and the left. Joe Biden has run out of scare tactics to use, and we won't let you forget about all the lies he's told. See, that's the real problem now. He can make any promise that he wants. The problem is, he made so many broken promises in the past, no black person's going to believe him now. So he can put all the money he wants into South Carolina, but if the black grassroots have our way, instead of South Carolina being the beginning of his re-election, it will be the end of his presidency. He showed us that he could ignore us and not give a rip. Well, now it's our turn. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Sherman Marshall, Amir Miller, Brenda McPherson, CLP, and Hefzibah. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.